Hey, it's Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present. And today we're going to pick up with the U.S. History Review. Remember, we talked about a whole time, every time we do one of these, try to impress upon you how important it is to do well on the U.S. History test, because it is the last test that you have to take, and it's kind of a gateway to you becoming a senior. Now, what you want to do, of course, is do your very best, get this test behind you so that your senior year will be stress-free. What we're going to do is pick up today with lesson number 7. We're going to look at the 20s, Depression, and the New Deal. So we're going to look at an exciting period in the history of the United States of America, a depressing period in U.S. history, and then a period of hope. So what we hope to do, of course, is to go through and give you a few of the highlights, and then give you some tips and some strategies that you can use, of course, to kind of master some of this information just as quick as you possibly can. What we'll do, of course, is start with the map assessment blueprint. And what it basically does is it tells you what parts of the test, of course, are the most important according to what the state of Mississippi has determined with the map assessment in terms of what needs to be mastered by students. The approximate weight tells you where where the questions are going to come from. And as we said before, the contemporary United States of America, which is standards 10, 11, and 12, is typically where most of the test items come from. It can make up as much as 30% of the test. What we'll do is look at U.S. History Standard 5, the 1920s and the 1930s, hence the 20s, the Depression and the New Deal. It says evaluate the impact of social and economic changes and the conflict between traditionalism and modernism in the 1920s through the 1930s. So what we were going to attempt to do, of course, is to give you some of the highlights in terms of the changes in America, in terms of the way that we view things, especially when you look at the 20s and the 30s. All right. And we're also going to look at the standard number 6. And standard number 6 is Great Depression and New Deal, analyze the causes and effect of the Great Depression and the New Deal. All right, we're going to start with the Roaring 20s. And you see on the left over there, you have the flapper image, the short, in this particular case, the skirt, of course, where her legs are showing, of course, and then she has the bobbed hair, of course, and makeup, and when you look at this particular image, this marks kind of a change in the way that most Americans have been before. Your grandmother in the late 1800s wouldn't have dressed like this, and your mother wouldn't have dressed like this. But in the 1920s, we're going to see that there's going to be a little bit of a change from a more traditional style to a more modern style, and that flapper image is that modern style. The 1920s were marked by economic prosperity, cultural change, and social upheaval. The decade saw the rise of consumerism, people buying stuff, the growth of industries like automobiles and radio, and the spread of modern culture, including jazz and the Harlem Renaissance. It was also characterized by the rise of the stock market, increased urbanization. The 20s gave women the suffrage and freedom to be independent outside the home, dress the way that they want, and basically put themselves out there for the first time. They weren't just extensions of their husbands. They weren't extensions, of course, of their fathers. Now, women, of course, are beginning to come in their own. Prohibition from 1920 to 1933, the 18th Amendment in 1919 was passed. It banned the production, sale, and transportation of alcohol in the United States. The Prohibition era gave rise to organized crime with people like Al Capone down here on the left. Elliot Ness, of course, who becomes one of the members of the FBI or the G-Men responsible for trying to bring people like Al Capone, of course, to justice. The Prohibition era gave rise to organized crime, bootlegging, and growing resistance to the government regulation, as we said, but Prohibition was repealed by the 21st Amendment in 1933. And they would do all sorts of things to try to kind of circumvent the Volstead Act, which was the 19th Amendment, from getting doctor's prescriptions so that you can drink whiskey. So those, and then, of course, speakeasies, where they would drink in these illegal bars and have secret code words so that you can gain admittance to the bars and stuff like so. Where there's a will, I guess there's a way, even though it's supposed to be illegal. The Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s, the Harlem Renaissance was a cultural movement of flourishing African-American literature, art, music, and intellectualism, centered in Harlem, New York. Figures like Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, and Duke Ellington were some of the prominent members of the Harlem Renaissance during this time, marking a significant moment in the African-American cultural history. When you look at some of those writers in the Harlem Renaissance, you look at people like County Cullen, Langston Hughes, who are all the writers, Charlotte Mason, Carl Van Vechten, Walter Jekyll, Fannie Hurst, and up here, Elaine Locke, W.B. Du Bois, some of the intellectuals, Marcus Garvey. So when you look at some of these people, these are the the protagonists in the Harlem Renaissance. The stock market boomed and crashed in the 1920s. During the 1920s, stock prices soared as speculative investments in the market increased. This led to the 1929 stock market crash, which combined with other factors sparked the Great Depression. The collapse of stock markets highlighted the risk of unregulated capitalism. So we're going to find that when the stock market does crash, it's going to plunge America, of course, into the Great Depression and one of the bleakest periods in the history of the United States of America. Here you see a picture of The Migrant Mother by Dorothea Lange, who becomes one of the most iconic pieces of art in the 1920s that details the difficulties, of course, of raising kids during the Depression. The stock market crash of '29 triggered the Great Depression and an economic catastrophe that resulted in massive unemployment, widespread poverty, and the collapse of businesses and banks. The Depression severely impacted both urban and rural America, leading to a major rethinking of economic policy and government intervention. So not only are our attitudes going to change in the 1920s, but the government's attitude is going to change also. We're going to go from more of a stand on your own 2 feet and pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of mentality to the government doing more to support people in times of difficulty. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s. This is one of the pictures from the Dust Bowl. It's a pretty powerful piece. What you see here is because of the drought in the 1930s, the topsoil basically blew away. Severe drought and poor farming practices led to the Dust Bowl, which devastated large areas of the Great Plains. It resulted in massive crop failures, displaced families, and the migration of thousands of Okies, or these people from the Great Plains who went to California. There were writers like John Steinbeck that talked about some of the difficulties that these people faced on the way and some of the difficulties that they faced while they were on the farms. The crisis underscored the vulnerability of American agriculture and the need for government intervention. And we're going to find that because of what happens in the Dust Bowl, once again, that attitude of the government in terms of what it can do to help people changes a little bit. The farmer traditionally hasn't been someone that the government's done a whole lot to help, and we're going to find that after this Dust Bowl and during the Great Depression, the government's going to take a more active role in doing what it can to support American farm. Franklin Roosevelt, in election in 1932, Franklin Roosevelt's landslide victory over incumbent Herbert Hoover in 1932 marked a shift toward a new role for the federal government in addressing economic and social issues. Here you have Hoover on the right, and Hoover was a Republican that believed that everyone should pull themselves up by their bootstraps and work hard with through rugged individualism and overcome whatever their issues are. Franklin Roosevelt, the Democrat on the left, changes that philosophy. And so the government goes from this shift of standing on your own and doing what you can, of course, to solve your own circumstances and situations, to the government giving more of a helping hand and giving a hand up to people. Roosevelt's promise of a New Deal marked the beginning of a comprehensive effort to combat the Great Depression through federal intervention through direct relief opposed by Hoover. The New Deal from 1933 to 1939, the New Deal implemented by President Franklin Roosevelt was a series of federal programs and reforms designed to provide the 3 R's, relief, recovery, and reform in response to the Great Depression. Key aspects included the establishment of Social Security, which is still around today, the creation of job programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Works Progress Administration, and the creation of regulatory agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission to oversee financial markets. Before the New Deal, the government did very little, of course, to regulate businesses. We're going to find that after, and during the New Deal and after, we're going to find that the government takes a more of an active role in doing what it can, of course, to regulate business and goes a little bit away from that laissez-faire approach to business. The Social Security Act of 1935, one of the cornerstone achievements of the New Deal is Social Security, created a system of retirement benefits for the elderly, unemployed, insurance, and acceptance of assistance for disabled and dependent children. Social Security represented a significant shift in the role of the federal government in providing for citizens' welfare away from rugged individual and pulling one's up by them bootstraps. All right, here you have the National Industrial Recovery Act of 1933, or the Wagner Act, and what it basically did is it legalized unions. And you see a cartoon that says organized labor, and you see it's a short-sighted employer that's trying to stop organized labor, but we're going to find that what happens is that the government will take on a role of doing what it can, of course, to support labor. And by supporting labor, it was supporting, workers. And we're going to find that that's going to be a little bit of a shift. Before the Depression, before the passage of the Wagner Act, we're going to find that the government, in most cases, sided with businesses and not with labor. The Wagner Act, on the other hand, secured wages, workers' rights to unionize, bargain collective, and legalized unions. strengthening the labor movements and protecting workers from employer retaliation. Once again, now we have all those historical facts, and once again, that we keep telling you, it's important that you understand that in order to do well in the U.S. history test, you have to have a pretty good understanding of what the historical facts are. And what we try to do, of course, is give you a list of all those particular facts. And what we've said to you before is what we want you to do, of course, is to create flashcards with all these facts, because it's the easiest way that you can go through and gain a knowledge about a lot of facts, real fast. So once again, create those flashcards, and they can be helpful because you can not only study by yourself anywhere, but you could also get friends and family, of course, to help you out. What we try to do is to give you some insights about the 20s in terms of the change, going from more of a traditional to a modern approach when it comes to the American woman. We also talked about the Volstead Act, how it went from being a country, of course, of drinkers, which a lot of people attribute to be some of the problems, contribute to the problems that we were having in the country. And then we, of course, looked at the shift in the government. So what we try to do with those standards, it was talking about a shift in the way that America, a shift in the way that America, of course, approaches things. And we hope we gave you a pretty good insight on that. Remember, the U.S. history test is very important because it is the last test you take before you officially become a senior. And it's a gateway to you becoming a senior. And if you do well there, once again, that senior year will be a breeze. All you have to do is show up to school. Now, you got to do a little work when you get there, but for the most part, it makes it a whole lot easier because you don't have this, of course, hanging over your head. This is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present, and we'll see you next time.